Let me back up for a moment. You know, we've all seen the data. 40%, there's 90 whatever percent of the West or the American public believes in a personal God that responds to their prayers. And then you ask, well, what is that percentage for scientists? Averaged over disciplines, it's about 40%. And then you say, how about the elite scientists, members of the National Academy of Sciences? An article on those data recently in Nature, it said 85% of the National Academy reject a personal God. And then they compare it to 90% of the public. You know, that's not the story there. They missed the story. What that article should have said is, how come this number isn't 0? That's the story. Okay? So my esteemed colleague here, Professor Krauss here says all we have to do is make a scientifically literate public. Well, when you do, how can they do better than the scientists themselves in their percentages of who is religious and who isn't? That's kind of unrealistic, I think. So there's something else going on that nobody seems to be talking about. That as you become more scientific, yes, the religiosity drops off, but it asymptotes. It asymptotes not at 0. It asymptotes at some other level, so they should be the subject of everybody's investigation, not the public. I'm telling you. So it's not 85% reject, it's that 15% of the most brilliant minds the nation has accepts it. And that's something that we can't just sweep under the rug. Otherwise, we're being disingenuous to the efforts here. So I fast forward to 21st century, and what do you find? You get things like this, okay? This is in America. All right? So now, what I find interesting is the level of passion that it requires to actually do it. You got to like pay for this, okay? And it means a lot of people are pissed off at the Big Bang. They're pissed off at the Big Bang. At our museum in New York, the American Museum of Natural History, they come to the Big Bang exhibit, and sometimes I don't feel like having that conversation. I say, why don't you go to our hall of human biology first, and then come to us? And that's where we have sort of monkeys holding hands with people in skeleton forms, and then they never make it back to the Big Bang. They're gone forever. Okay, so however egregious the Big Bang is, monkeys and people is a worse transgression, apparently. So there's that, but there's also, here's a little bit of intelligent design here. Here's one that wants to accept the science, but then is like what's before the Big Bang. We don't quite know yet, so God was there. So of course, intelligent design is basically a God of the gaps. But my favorite way to end this, then, is to just reflect on, I want to do it just a fast tirade on stupid design, and this will be fast. Look at all the things that just want to kill us, okay? Most planet orbits are unstable. Star formation is completely inefficient. Most places in the universe will kill life instantly. Instantly. There are people that say, oh, the forces of nature are just right for life. Excuse me. Just look at the volume of the universe where you can't live. You will die instantly. That's not what I call the Garden of Eden, all right? Galaxy orbits that we orbit once every couple 100 million years, you're bound to come close to a supernova that will wipe out your ozone layer and kill everybody on the surface who doesn't otherwise have dark skin, because your high energy rays will give you skin cancer. We're on a collision course with the Andromeda Galaxy. Gone is this beautiful spiral that we have. And of course, we're on a one-way expanding universe as we wind down to oblivion, as the temperature of the universe asymptotically approaches absolute zero. That's the universe. Then Earth, volcanoes, tsunami just killed, I think that number's higher, up 200,000 people, floods, tornadoes. None of this is any sign that there's a benevolent anything out there. And this 90% should be 99%, as was earlier noted. That's of all life that has ever lived is now extinct. Inner solar system is a shooting gallery, comets, asteroids, duck. And look how long it took to make multicellular life. Not from the beginning of the Earth. Life happened quickly, but not multicellular life. You needed your cyanobacteria to sort of crank on the oxygen, get the oxygen budget going. Then you could have sort of That's sort of rocket fuel for multicellular creatures. But that took 3.5 billion years. That's hardly an efficient plan with us in mind. And in human beings, this is like the most tragic of them. I don't even include here the expression of free will where people want to kill each other. I'm talking about nature killing us without the help of human beings. Aggressive childhood leukemia, hemophilia, all of this. And we so much praise about the human eye, but anyone who's seen the full breadth of the electromagnetic spectrum will recognize how blind we are, okay? And part of that blindness means we can't see, we can't detect magnetic fields, ionizing radiation, radon. We are like sitting ducks for ionizing radiation. We have to eat constantly because we're warm-blooded. Crocodile eat a chicken a month, it's fine, okay? So we're always looking for food. These gases at the bottom, you can't smell them, taste them, you breathe them in, you're dead, okay? So I'm almost done. I'm sorry, I'm taking up your time here. And with the birth defects, most are unknown. Look at this. Others, it's like abuse and infection and stuff that human beings have something to do with. We have no idea. Oops, I pushed a button by accident, sorry. No idea. No idea. And, and birth defects are tragic. They're tragic, particularly if they happen to the family afflicted by it. And you just look at images of these aborted fetuses because of and most of these are stillborn, others are born with a heart outside the body. And so this is all simply stupid design. And the problem is, if you look for what is intelligent, and yeah, you can find some things that are just really beautiful and really, hey, that's a clever. The ball socket of the shoulder, and a lot of things you can point to, but then you stop looking at all the things that confound that revelation. And so if I came upon a frozen waterfall and it just struck me for all its beauty, I would then turn over the rock and try to find a millipede, okay, or some kind of deadly newt, and then put that in context and realize, of course, the universe is not here for us, for any singular purpose. My favorite of all is, of course, you eat, breathe, eat, and drink through the same hole in your body, guaranteeing that some percent of us will choke to death every year, okay? Imagine if you had a separate hole for breathing and eating and talking. That would be just really cool, right? You could drink, breathe, and just talk, and you would never choke, all right? And it's not a hard request. Dolphins breathe and eat through different holes in their body. And that's a mammal. So this is like Santa Claus could bring this one. And this one, of course, my favorite of all, what's this going on between our legs, right? As you've heard, you've heard it. It's like an entertainment complex in the middle of a sewage system. No engineer would design that at all, ever. It's like the wrong juxtaposition of elements. So what I want to put on the table is the fact that I don't want the religious person in the lab telling me that God is responsible for what it is they cannot discover. Because look at the hubris of that. You're in the lab and you say, I don't know how this works. And not only that, no one alive on earth knows how this works. And not only that, no one who will ever be born will know how this works. That's kind of audacious when you think about it. And then you put it down and go on to the next problem. If this problem is a cure for Alzheimer's or cancer or whatever else, I don't want them in the science classroom. And so the issue is simply about progress and discovery. And in my recent forays into Washington, well, I've been closer to a community of Republicans than I have ever been in my life, because I grew up in New York City. And in New York City, I think that person is Republican back there. You see? No, not that one, the one behind that person. Yeah, that's a Republican. There's another one. That's in New York. So you grow up this way, and I get sort of baptized into a Republican administration. I had 2 consecutive appointments in the Bush administration, one on aerospace, on the aerospace industry, and one on space exploration, NASA's future, basically. And I realized something, spending that much time in the community of powerful Republicans, that Republicans, above all else, do not want to die poor. So there's a limit to how far this will go. And I bet most people in this room, even those assembled at this table, were highly concerned about the Dover trial, wondering how that would turn. And I looked at that and I said, I'm not worried, because it's a Republican judge. And in the end, if you put people who are not making discoveries in the science classroom, that is the end of the foundation of your future economy. And so I had a little more confidence than others did because of this sensitivity to the money aspect of it. But we all know tomorrow's economies will be founded on innovations in science and technology, and of course that gets cut short if we lose our civilization, as what happened in Islam in 1100. And the last thought I'll leave you with, but Ptolemy, was one of the greatest scientists ever and most influential scientists, and his most important work is, of course, Al-Majest, which is Arabic for the greatest. And in it, he sort of codifies the geocentric universe. And this Earth-centered universe prevailed for centuries until Copernicus and Galileo turned that around. But what I want to call your attention to are notes that he penned in the margin of the manuscript of his work. Let me remind you that back then, you would look up at the night sky and the planets would move against the background stars. They would wander, because that's what the word means in Greek, is wanderer. And there were 7 of these objects, the sun and moon included. And they would just kind of move. They'd go to the left, and then they'd slow down and pause, and then they'd back up, and then they'd reverse again. And this was a mystery, complete mystery. And of course, the heavens were not Earth, and so the fact that you didn't really understand what was going up there was kind of okay and expected, because that was the work of the gods. And we, being mortal down here on Earth, if you can't understand it, don't lose sleep over that fact. You perhaps never will. Now, Ptolemy had sort of the best going explanation anyone had put forth with the epicycles and the like. But nonetheless, this is the boundary between what is known and unknown about how the machinery of the universe works, and he pens these words, which for me are one of the most beautiful and poetic references to the state of one's knowledge ever written. I know that I am mortal by nature and ephemeral, but when I trace at my pleasure the windings to and fro of the heavenly bodies, I no longer touch earth with my feet. I stand in the presence of Zeus himself and take my fill of ambrosia. And so therein is this emotional, he's got this sort of religious feeling at the limits of his knowledge. And this is a trend that will continue for thousands of years to follow this. At least 2,000 years to follow this. Some of the greatest minds that have preceded us have done just this, okay? That's Ptolemy. But we can go on. Sir Isaac Newton. Now, I don't know what you know of Isaac Newton, but everything I've read of his tells me that there's no greater genius to ever walk the surface of this earth. By the way, in his Principia, here's the page 1, page 0 of Principia. In it, he discovers the laws of motion, F equals ma, discover the laws of gravity. It's all there. And he did this all before he turned 26. And in this, when he talks about motion, there's no reference to God. When he talks about his two-body force that he deduced, this universal law of gravitation, there is no mention of God. It's just not anywhere there, because he understood it. He was on top of it. He was there. Even though the understanding of the motions of the planets before he came along was given unto God, because nobody understood it. Or nobody understood well enough to really believe that they had a full predictive handle on it in the way the universal law of gravitation supplied. And so what you have is Isaac Newton abandoning reference to God until he realizes that if all you do is calculate the two-body problem, here we have like the moon and earth. Yes, he's got that calculated. Now you have the sun and the earth. You got that. But wait a minute, now the earth and the moon go around the sun, and sometimes we're close to Mars and sometimes we're not. And when it comes near Mars, there's a tug that's stronger there than in any other part in the orbit. And then it comes over here, and then Jupiter tugs. And it's all these mini tugs. And so he's got to do this two-body problem for Earth, the moon, Earth and the sun, Earth, moon, and Mars, Earth, moon, Mars, and Jupiter, and it becomes a rapidly complex problem. And he realizes that, in fact, applying this simple sort of approach to calculating the stability of the solar system, he finds he can't stabilize the solar system. He can't account for how we have stayed this way for as long as what was possibly necessary from the beginning of the universe. And so what does he say? He's at his limits. He's at his limits. And so you read but God is nowhere until you get to the general Sholem. And then he says, the 6 primary planets are revolved about the sun in circles concentric with the sun, and with motions directed towards the same parts and almost in the same plane. He's got the whole picture now, and he's trying to sort of account for that. But he can't just simply doing 2-body calculations, certainly not without a computer or without a new kind of mathematics. He says, but is it not to be conceived that mere mechanical causes could give birth to so many regular motions? This most beautiful system of the sun, planets, and comets could only proceed from the counsel and dominion of an intelligent and powerful being. This is Isaac Newton invoking intelligent design at the limits of his knowledge. And so what concerns me now is, even if you're as brilliant as Newton, you reach a point where you start basking in the majesty of God, and then your discovery stops. It just stops. You're kind of no good anymore for advancing that frontier, waiting for somebody else to come behind you who doesn't have God on the brain, and who says, that's a really cool problem, I want to solve it. They come in and solve it. But look at the time delay. This was a 100-year time delay. And the math that's in perturbation theory is like crumbs for Newton. He could have come up with that. The guy invented calculus just on a dare, practically. When someone asked him, Ike, how come planets orbit in ellipses and not some other shape? And he couldn't answer that. He goes home for 2 months, comes back, out comes integral differential calculus, because he needed that to answer that question. And so this is the kind of mind we were dealing with Newton. He could have gone there, but he didn't. He didn't. His religiosity stopped him. And so we're left with the realization, of course, that intelligent design, while real in the history of science, while real in the presence of sort of philosophical drivers, is nonetheless a philosophy of ignorance. And so, regardless of what our political agenda is, all you have to say is, science is a philosophy of discovery, intelligent design is a philosophy of ignorance. That's all. I don't need to see whether, have you discovered anything lately? If not, get out of the science classroom. But I'm not going to say, don't teach this, because it's real, it happened. So I don't want people to sweep it under the rug, because if you do, you're neglecting something fundamental that's going on in people's minds when they confront things they don't understand. And it happens to the greatest of the minds, as it happens to everyone else, many, if not most other people in the public.
Guys, I apologize that this video took this long to find, man. I really thought I had watched every single deGrasse Tyson vast religious dogma video available out there, but clearly not. Perhaps, if you're lucky enough, there is more waiting for us out there, man. Anyway, I really hope that you've enjoyed the speech, man. This wonderful video is from a presentation that Neil gave at Beyond Belief, Science, Religion, Reason and Survival from the year 2006. The title of his presentation was The Perimeter of Ignorance, and given the points he's raised throughout the video, we can't help but feel a slight disappointment that almost 2 decades down the line, we're still having the same debates with devout believers, whatever that means, man. But hey, at least it's undeniable that the influence of religion has dropped significantly over those 2 decades. At least it has in the West and in East Africa, where I'm from. I'm not so sure about the rest of the world, but still I believe I'd be on the safer side if I assumed that the influence of religion today has dropped worldwide compared to where it was 20 years ago. Yeah, man. Anyway, back to Neil deGrasse Tyson in this speech, which is longer by the way. The whole speech is approximately 1 hour, and I'll leave a link to the full video in the description section below. Neil's main point in the speech was quite simple, and it's actually obvious in the title he chose for the presentation. What I personally took away is that the perimeter of ignorance is an ever-changing frontier between what we know and the vast unknown that lies beyond. It's not a wall like most most religious people would like us to believe, man. It's instead a horizon, one that expands with every step we take towards understanding our universe. Let's actually consider the night sky, for instance, man. Once our ancestors believed that the stars were fixed lights on a celestial sphere, the works of God or cosmic fires. Then afterwards came telescopes, and that perimeter shifted. We learned that stars were suns scattered across the galaxy, and we then eventually learned that our galaxy was one of billions if not trillions of galaxies. And to this day, with every question comes new questions. What is dark matter? What lies beyond the observable universe? And what even caused the Big Bang Theory, if that's actually the right theory of the beginning of the universe? The point is that the more we learn, the more we realize how much we do not know. And all of us, I think, should embrace this nature of discovery instead of retreating into a comfortable dogmatics, man. As Neil generously put it, the perimeter of ignorance is not a barrier to despair over, it is an invitation. It humbles us, reminding us that knowledge is not a fortress to be completed, but an endless landscape to explore. So, thank you guys for joining me today. I really hope that you've enjoyed the video. Please join me tomorrow for the next video, man. Peace.